A king walks out of a walled city, carrying bread and wine, and steps onto a valley floor that is still slick with blood, tracing seeds through generations like a legal ledger. Genealogies are the currency of the ancient Near East. The strict, unbending rules of Aaron's bloodline become the absolute law of the land. The priests guard the altar. The kings guard the throne. The two domains are fiercely separated, enforced by the threat of death. Melchizedek is buried in the past. He is a strange anomaly in the opening pages of Genesis, seemingly irrelevant to the massive religious machine operating in the city he once ruled, until a warrior from the tribe of Judah sits on that city's throne, picks up a stringed lyre, and writes a poem that nearly tears the legal framework of Israel in half. Let us look closely at the legal architecture of Psalm 110. David is the undisputed king of Israel. He belongs to the tribe of Judah. He rules from a throne of cedar and gold, but he cannot cross the temple courtyard. He cannot touch the bronze basin. The metallic scent of the altar and the thick smoke of the incense belong exclusively to the Levites. The wall between the crown and the altar is absolute. Then David writes a song. It is a coronation hymn. It is a royal decree. He describes a future sovereign. He overhears a divine conversation. God promises to shatter armies. God promises to make enemies a footstool. And then, right in the middle of the psalm, God makes an oath. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You do not hold power unless you can prove exactly what soil you grew from. Most people read this brief encounter in Genesis 14. You are a priest forever. After the order of Melchizedek. This is not a poetic callback. It is a legal demolition, with a single sentence. The text is claiming that the entire Levitical machine is temporary. Think about how the Aaronic priesthood actually functions. The entire system is built on death. A priest washes his hands. A priest burns the incense. A priest grows old. A priest dies. His son steps forward. His son puts on the jeweled breastplate. His son takes his place. The blood of bulls and goats dries on the stone. The smoke drifts away into the desert sky. The human guilt remains. The system demands a constant supply of new men, because the men keep returning to the dust. The altar is a revolving door of mortality. It is a beautiful, intricate mechanism, but it is fundamentally broken. It cannot permanently fix the human condition because the priests themselves are infected by it. But in Psalm 110, God reaches past the tabernacle. He bypasses Moses. He bypasses Aaron. He bypasses the strict genealogical ledgers of the law. He reaches all the way back to a valley slick with blood and pulls a ghost into the future. He promises a priest who does not trace his authority to a human father. He promises a priest who holds the royal scepter of Judah. As a simple historical pit stop, a polite greeting before Abram goes home. But if you look at the mechanics of this scene, and the sacred bread of Salem at exactly the same time, for 1,000 years, the name of Melchizedek was silent. Now, it is a divine guarantee. But the ultimate reveal of this mystery does not happen in the Psalms. The phantom king goes back into the shadows. He waits for another 1,000 years. He waits until the Roman Empire is actively crushing a small community of first-century believers. They are exhausted. They are bleeding. They are tempted to abandon Jesus and go back to the familiar, comforting smell of the temple incense. And an unnamed author sends them a letter that blows the doors off the entire biblical narrative. A heavy parchment scroll unrolls on a wooden table in a dimly lit, rented room. The Jewish believers listening to the reader are bruised, financially drained, and exhausted. Outside their doors, the Roman Empire is tightening its grip. But just down the road, the Second Temple, in Jerusalem, is still fully operational. They can smell the roasting meat from the massive bronze altar. They can hear the familiar, rhythmic chanting of the Levites cutting through the cool evening air. The temptation to go back to return to the visible, tangible safety of the old religious system is pulling at them like a physical gravity. They want to give up on an invisible Messiah. And more importantly, At the glaring hole the author deliberately leaves in the text, you realize you are looking at a structural earthquake. They want to return to a priesthood they can see. And the unnamed author of the letter to the Hebrews writes a theological masterpiece to stop them. He does not offer them empty, sentimental comfort. He builds an airtight, devastating legal argument that takes them all the way, back to the limestone cliffs of the Valley of Shaveh. He asks these exhausted Christians to look closely at the biological math of Genesis 14. Abram gave a tenth of the spoils to the king of Salem. Abram is the great-grandfather of Levi. Therefore, the author argues, the entire Levitical priesthood, every man who will ever wear the jeweled breastplate, every man who will ever carry the golden censer of incense, was still in the physical body of Abram when he bowed his head. When the patriarch knelt in the dust, the future priests knelt with him. The lesser is always blessed by the greater. The author of Hebrews is systematically dismantling the entire Levitical machine in their minds. He is telling these wavering believers that the familiar system they are longing for was actually superseded 1,000 years before it was even built. The temple is not a safe harbor. It is an obsolete shadow. The priesthood of Aaron is broken by design. It is constantly interrupted by death, requiring a never-ending river of animal blood that can never actually clear a human conscience. The real question of this valley isn't, why did Abram give him a tenth of the spoils? It's this: who gives a ghost the right? But then, the author points to the blank spaces on the Genesis scroll. He reminds them that Melchizedek appears without a genealogy, without a birth record, and without a recorded death. He explains that this literary silence was intentionally designed by the Spirit to foreshadow the true King of Righteousness. Jesus of Nazareth does not qualify to be a priest under the old rules. He is from the tribe of Judah, the royal line of kings. If he walked into the earthly temple to offer a sacrifice, the strict Levitical law would demand his immediate execution. But Jesus did not inherit his priesthood from a dying human father. He inherited it directly from the ancient oath of God. The old rules have been shattered. The genetic requirement has been completely erased. A new kind of priest has stepped onto the battlefield carrying bread and wine. And the exact Greek word the author uses to describe how this new priest holds his office is one of the most stunning words in the entire New Testament. The word is akatalutos. You find it in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 16. The author makes a devastating claim. Jesus did not secure his priesthood through a human bloodline. He secured it by the power of an indestructible life. To bless the Father of faith, we are a species haunted by the need for validation. We want to see the resume. The Greek word translated indestructible is akatalutos. It is built on the root verb kataluo. That verb means to dismantle. It means to tear down. It is the physical act of destroying a structure, prying it apart stone by heavy stone. Jesus uses this exact root word in Matthew 24. He points to the massive, sun-baked limestone blocks of the Jerusalem temple. He tells his disciples that every single stone will be kataluo. Every block will be thrown down. The physical temple can be dismantled. But the author of Hebrews adds a negative prefix to describe Jesus. Akatalutos, undismantleable. You can tear down the cedar walls. You can rip the heavy woven veil. You can scatter the ashes of Aaron's descendants into the desert wind. But you cannot dismantle this priest. Death tried. The grave failed. That root word changes exactly how you survive your own ruins. If you are in a season where your life feels dismantled, you need to hear this. You watch your security get thrown down. The phone rings with a brutal medical diagnosis. The bank account drains completely dry. A relationship shatters like brittle glass on a tile floor. You try to hold the pieces together. You try to build your own resume of worth. You stack achievements. You collect titles. You desperately want a paper trail to prove you have the right to survive. We demand the pedigree before we allow anyone to speak authority over our lives. The ancient Israelites felt this even more fiercely. The ancient Israelites did the exact same thing. They trusted the genealogical scrolls. They trusted the bloodlines. But paper burns. Bloodlines end. Most people assume a crumbling life means God has abandoned the building, but that assumption completely misses the reality of the Melchizedek priesthood. Your stability is not a physical circumstance you construct. It is a person you are tethered to. Your high priest is not standing in a fragile earthly temple. He is anchored in an undismantlable life. He stepped into the blood and the dust of your valley. He brought the bread. He brought the wine. When your resume fails, when your strength breaks, when you have absolutely nothing left to offer the king of Sodom, you are finally ready to meet the king of Salem, because your survival does not depend on your endurance. It depends on his. And that brings us back to the blank spaces on the Genesis scroll. The hot wind still blows across the valley of Shaveh. A tired warrior still stands in the dirt, surrounded by the spoils of war. And a shadowy king still walks out of the heat shimmer, holding out a meal that changes everything. To them, a priest without a lineage is a dangerous contradiction. A king without a genealogy is an imposter. Yet here he stands. A phantom priest walked onto a blood-soaked valley without a genealogy, and a new kind of rescue was born. A patriarch surrendered 1/10 of his victory to a stranger, and the religious framework of Israel bowed its head. A king carried a name meaning absolute righteousness and divine justice stepped into human violence. A ruler governed a city, meaning absolute peace and wholeness was offered to a fractured world. A warrior poet wrote a song 1,000 years later, and the rigid, dying system of Aaron was put on notice. An unnamed author warned exhausted believers not to go back, and the indestructible life of the Messiah was finally revealed. A savior stepped out of a borrowed tomb with breath in his lungs, and the ancient oath of God was finalized forever. Same shadow, same king. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the silence of the text. The blank spaces on the Genesis scroll. Not a single ancestor listed. Not a single biological requirement demanded. The very first time a priest steps into the biblical narrative, he does not stand behind a heavy curtain waiting for you to prove you are clean enough to approach, casting a long shadow over the greatest patriarch in history. This man has no father listed. This man has no mother named. He walks directly onto the battlefield while you are still covered in the dirt and the blood. If you are in a season where you feel completely disqualified, where you don't have the spiritual resume, the background, or the strength to hold your life together, stop trying to build a paper trail. The true high priest is not checking your pedigree. He is not asking for your genealogical proof of worth. He is walking into your valley, right now, carrying the bread and the wine of an undismantlable life. And may the God who bypasses every human requirement to reach you, walk with you through your own valley, and bring you out carrying a peace you could not have earned any other way. If this reached something deep in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels disqualified by their own history. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. This man has no beginning of days and no end of life, recorded in a book that records everyone's beginning and everyone's end. Abram has just slaughtered 4 armies. He has chased them in the dark all the way to Hobah, north of Damascus. His men are exhausted. This man is not a footnote in the story of Abram. He is the blueprint for a completely different kind of rescue. To feel the shockwave of this moment, and to understand why a single verse in Genesis haunts the rest of the Bible, you have to look at the brutal, unbending rules of ancient priesthood. You have to understand exactly what it took to stand between God and man. To understand the anomaly of Genesis 14, you have to fast forward a few centuries and look at the legal architecture that will eventually govern the nation of Israel. In the ancient Near East, blood is not just family. It is the ultimate and exclusive credential for power. When the Israelites eventually build their tabernacle in the wilderness, the rules surrounding the altar are terrifyingly precise. You cannot simply volunteer to serve God. You cannot feel a subjective calling in your heart. Walk into the dusty courtyard and offer a sacrifice. The moment you step past the heavy woven curtains of the sanctuary, your life depends entirely on your DNA. The priesthood is restricted to one specific tribe, Levi, and within that tribe, one specific bloodline, the descendants of Aaron, if your name is not written in the genealogical scrolls. You are strictly disqualified. If you approach the bronze altar to handle the ash and the roasted meat without the correct great-grandfather, the penalty is death. Their bronze swords are heavy, their hands are blistered, and their tunics are thick with the white dust of the king's highway. The ancient texts take this so seriously that centuries later, when the Jewish exiles returned to a ruined Jerusalem from Babylon, several families claim to be priests. They want to serve, but they search for their ancestral records in the public archives, and the brittle parchment is missing. They are immediately banned from serving the altar. Without the paper trail, their claim is useless. The priesthood is not a vocation you choose. It is a genetic inheritance you are born into. And this obsession with genealogy creates a rigid separation of powers. In the biblical framework that is coming, the men who wear crowns and the men who wear priestly ephods are separated by an invisible, impenetrable wall. Kings will come from the tribe of Judah. Priests will come from the tribe of Levi. The royal scepter and the golden incense censer are never allowed to be held by the same hands. When King Uzziah eventually tries to cross this boundary, storming into the temple to burn incense himself, leprosy instantly erupts on his forehead. The priests drive him out, and he is quarantined until the day he dies. The crown and the altar are mutually exclusive domains. You can rule the people, or you can represent the people before God. You cannot do both. Every ancient reader knows this legal framework in their bones. They have recovered the stolen captives and the plundered wealth of Sodom. But the adrenaline of the night raid is fading. They know the meticulous, exhausting ledgers of First Chronicles. They know the heavy scent of frankincense is strictly guarded by the sons of Aaron. They know that legitimacy requires a beginning, a father, and a verified tribal origin, which is exactly what makes the quiet encounter in the Valley of Shaveh so shocking. Because long before Levi is even born, long before Aaron puts on the jeweled breastplate, and centuries before David sits on a throne, a man steps onto the pages of Genesis holding both the crown and the priesthood in his hands. 4 kings sweep across the Jordan Valley. They crush 5 local monarchs. They empty the cities. They take the gold. They take the livestock. They take Abram's nephew, Lot. Abram hears the news. He arms 318 men. He marches into the dark. He splits his forces. He strikes at night. He shatters an imperial army and takes back every single piece of plunder. Now, the dust settles. The adrenaline drains away. The Valley of Shaveh is loud with the lowing of stolen cattle and the exhausted cries of rescued families. Abram stands in the center of the chaos, his bronze sword finally sheathed. His hands are blistered from the grip. The king of Sodom walks out to meet him. Sodom is a city already famous for its darkness. It is an empire built on exploitation. The Valley of Shaveh is quiet, save for the wind blowing through the limestone cliffs and the ragged breathing of tired soldiers. Its king looks at Abram and makes a highly calculated offer. Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. He wants a transaction. He wants to buy the allegiance of the patriarch. He wants Abram to walk away rich, knowing that Sodom signed the check. But before Abram can answer, the scene fractures. Another king walks onto the blood-soaked dirt. He does not bring a treaty. He brings a meal. He carries baked bread and fermented wine. The warm scent of yeast and crushed grapes cuts cleanly through the heavy, metallic air of the valley. He walks right past the king of Sodom. He steps directly in front of Abram. The text tells us he is the king of Salem, a city perched on a limestone hill that will one day be called Jerusalem. He wears a crown. He serves as a priest, 2 titles resting on one man. In a world where authority requires a bloodline, he simply exists. He does not list his ancestors. He does not announce his pedigree. He looks at the exhausted warrior, raises his hands, and speaks. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. This is not a polite greeting. It is a divine claim. The king of Sodom offered wealth. The king of Salem offers a covering. And Abram's response is immediate. He does not ask for credentials. And then, a stranger approaches out of the heat shimmer. He does not bring weapons. He brings a meal. He does not demand a genealogical scroll. He looks at this stranger, and he reaches into the massive piles of recovered loot. He pulls out the absolute best of the silver, the gold, and the finely woven garments. He gives a tenth of everything to a man he just met. A tithe. Centuries before the law requires it. Centuries before the Levitical priests demand it. The father of the Jewish nation bows his head and pays a tithe to a phantom priest. He recognizes an authority that supersedes his own. But to understand exactly what Abram saw, you cannot just look at the bread and the wine. You have to look at the name of the man holding them. You have to look at the exact Hebrew words the author uses to introduce him to the world. In Genesis chapter 14, verse 18, the author finally gives this mysterious figure a name, and the syllables carry the weight of an entire theology. If you read the English translation, you see the name Melchizedek, which sounds like a standard ancient Near Eastern title. But if you were reading the brittle parchment of the original scroll, rolling the guttural consonants over your tongue, you would read the Hebrew word Melchizedek. It is a compound word. The first half of the name is Melech, the standard Hebrew term for a king or a sovereign ruler. The warm scent of baked grain and fermented wine cuts sharply through the metallic smell of iron and sweat. The second half is the noun tzedek, which translates to righteousness, absolute justice, or moral perfection. When you fuse them together, his very name literally translates to, "My king is righteousness." But the text also tells us exactly where he rules, explicitly naming him as the King of Salem. That city name is derived directly from the ancient Hebrew root shalom, which means peace, absolute wholeness, and the restoration of all broken things. If the language of the Bible suddenly feels less like a flat history book and more like a three-dimensional map, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So, the King of Righteousness speaks to Abram, and he does not invoke a local pagan deity. He blesses the patriarch in the name of El Elyon, God Most High, the supreme possessor of heaven and earth. We see this exact combination of concepts collide centuries later in Psalm 85, when a temple poet writes that one day, righteousness and peace will kiss each other. That linguistic root changes everything about the bread and the wine he carries into the metallic, blood-soaked smell of the battlefield. Melchizedek is not a random Canaanite warlord who happens to worship the correct deity. He is the living intersection of divine justice and absolute peace. He steps directly in front of Abram, the man who has just conquered the kings of the East, and he lifts his hands to speak a blessing, walking onto a landscape of human violence to feed an exhausted conqueror. He arrives, fully formed, carrying the authority of God himself, completely untethered from the rigid systems of human inheritance. But what the author of Genesis deliberately leaves out of this text is actually far louder than the names he includes. And that silence is about to become the most dangerous precedent in the biblical narrative. Abram watches the king of Salem walk away. The hot wind blows across the valley of Shave, lifting the white dust and erasing the stranger's footprints from the blood-stained dirt. The bread has been eaten. The wine has been swallowed. The man wearing the crown and carrying the authority of God Most High turns his back and disappears into the limestone hills of Canaan. And then, the story simply moves on. The author of Genesis dips a reed pen into the ink and writes the next chapter. He chronicles Abram's doubts. He details his children. He records his failures. But for the king of Salem, the parchment remains completely blank. No father is recorded. No mother is named. No tribal lineage is traced in the text. In a book obsessed with ancestry, where these are the generations of, is the relentless drumbeat of the narrative, where every patriarch's lifespan is counted to the exact year. Genesis is a book obsessed with bloodlines. A man's identity is tethered entirely to his father. Entire chapters are dedicated to who begot whom. This one man is dropped into the story, with no beginning and no end. He has no birth narrative. He has no death scene. He simply exists. The silence is not an accident. The omission is not a mistake. The blank space on the parchment is not a failure of memory. The absence of his genealogy is not a missing piece of the historical record. It is the theological point. The text is deliberately constructing a phantom. It is framing a priest whose right to stand before God does not depend on human genetics. He did not inherit his title from a dying father. He will not pass his priesthood to a fragile son. His authority does not come from his bloodline. His authority comes from his nature. He comes out of nowhere. He blesses the father of the faithful. He receives a tenth of the spoils. He vanishes into the hills. And for exactly 1,000 years, the biblical text does not speak his name again. Generations rise and fall. The Israelite nation grows. They build a tabernacle in the desert. The Levitical priests meticulously wash their hands in bronze basins. The heavy woven curtains of the sanctuary are pulled shut. The bronze altar runs red with the blood of bulls. And the thick scent of roasted meat and frankincense fills the air.